Thanks for joining us. We're going to take a deep dive into what makes for a successful RPO engagement. And offering their insight this morning are Karen Pearson. She's Assistant Vice President of Talent Acquisition for Capital Group, one of the world's largest investment management organizations. And Colleen Reese, Vice President of Client Delivery for a talent management solutions provider on SourceRight. So ladies, thank you. We'll shut the door. Yeah, we will come. Great.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Karen Pearson, as she mentioned. I'm from Capital Group. I've been with Capital Group about 8 years. I've worked with them in the talent acquisition area as well as in a generalist role, most recently leading the talent acquisition group in the U.S. We hire about 1,000 associates a year, so we've been very busy, and we are primarily located in the U.S., but we do also have global hiring as well.
Hi, good morning. My name is Colleen Reese. I'm the VP of Client Delivery for SourceRight. So we're the RPO that is supportive of Capital Group's hiring initiatives. I've been in the RPO business for the last 9 years. Prior to that, as in staffing. And my role is to enhance the partnership as much as we can. And I think we're going to go through our story today, and you'll kind of see how that developed. Karen will do an introduction and sort of a background of what Capital Group's needs were prior to bringing the RPO business in. We'll tell our story around how we collaborated to begin RPO assistance in their hiring initiatives. And then we'll talk about 6 areas of advantage that we have as a supplier and supporting Capital Group. So very excited to have Karen here, and we enjoy our partnership very much, so I hope that comes across.
Okay, so Capital Group, we're probably best known for our American funds. So we're a mutual fund company. We have global offices, as I mentioned, primarily located in the U.S. We're headquartered in Los Angeles, California, which is a little bit different for an asset management company. Makes a challenge for recruiting. And we are about 85 years old now, so we've been around for a bit. So one of our largest populations in the company is our financial service representative. And in this role, we've got about 3,000 people, and this is where we've done the bulk of our hiring over the past year. And so these roles, we say they're not your average service rep, and there's a reason for that. We look for people who have both customer service experience as well as some financial acumen. We put them through a pretty rigorous training program, a 3-month training program. They're dealing with not just individuals who hold our mutual funds, but they're also dealing with financial advisors. So they need to be able to speak at a variety of levels when they're talking about our funds. We have a very high bar. We put Colleen and her team through a lot to try to help us figure out how do we screen for this type of skill set. And we have really found there's a very diverse background of people who come into these roles. Some have service center experience in other companies. Some come from more kind of the financial side. They may have been in advisor roles. And then we have others that are coming maybe fresh out of college. So there's a really wide variety. So when we look at our candidate pool, you can't just look at a resume and identify it and say that person is going to be a great service rep. We want to make sure that we're putting them through a pretty rigorous process. We do a competency-based interview process with them to try to identify those. The other unique thing about Capital is we have a lot of longevity in our company. Many of the people in our company have been their whole career at Capital, which is, I think, unusual nowadays. Our average tenure is 9.8 years, so a pretty long tenured associates in our company. So I stepped into the job about 1.5 years ago, and we're in a situation where we needed to do some hiring very quickly. So as we came out of the recession, we realized we needed to be able to offer different products and services. We needed to build up our sales base. We needed to build up our service center base to be able to answer to all of those challenges in the economy. What had happened during the course of the recession is we had shrunk in our recruiting group. It was very small. It was a skeleton crew, really. And all of a sudden, we had this increase, which was like a hockey stick, right? Like off the charts. And so as I stepped into the role, we had already started some conversations with Randstad. They had done a little bit of work for us, not to the scale of what we needed. So as we started, kind of thinking about this increase in hiring, I think one of the biggest challenges was all of a sudden all the other companies in our area were hiring. So we had many service centers popping up in San Antonio and other places where we have our service group. We also recognized we hadn't looked at our branding and our recruitment branding in many years. We hadn't looked at our interview processes. We hadn't looked at really that kind of end-to-end cranking up the machine again. So that was kind of part of what our challenge was, that we needed to figure out how do we get this going really quickly.
So enter Randstad SourceRight, right? 3 years ago. I can't believe it's been 3 years. We're hiring about 500 people a year, primarily in that service representative area. We're also supporting their accounting and finance departments as well, so lots of growth. So we own the sourcing and screening piece. We're starting to expand into helping with some of their interview scheduling and also doing some of their skill survey, background checking, and potentially some assessments as we move forward. So our role was to come in and to share the process with Capital Group's internal recruiting team, doing that sourcing and screening and candidate selection. And then Karen's group took on the interview process and that selection. We've introduced a multitude of technologies. We continue to explore a number of those, and we'll talk a little bit about digital interviewing and our use of a CRM tool that has helped enhance our recruiting ability. So our role was to be scalable. So as their volumes began to increase, we needed to be able to add staff quickly, to get them onboarded quickly, to understand the Capital Group business and the profile that we were looking for, and be able to address their issues with respect to the volume of requisitions. Change management, so really helping Karen and her team to educate their internal teams on what our role was in the process. And that was not an easy task initially, so we've grown into that and made some real improvements there. And the way that we've done that is through a strong collaboration, strong communication with Karen and her team and her hiring teams, and also presenting our metrics. So what's our level of success in helping them enhance the number of candidates that they're seeing. And then we are constantly in a process improvement program. We're looking at Capital Group's employer brand strategy, how we can enhance that through tools and technology, providing market analytics and market research to help Capital Group understand the challenges in their own market, and then making adjustments to what we're doing constantly in an improvement process.
So we'll talk a little bit about our journey. So as I mentioned, we had pressure on the internal team. There was a lot of activity that we hadn't been ready for. We didn't have that much flexibility in being able to staff to these cycles and be able to quickly kind of ramp up. We had long recruiting, so if a manager came to me and said, how long would it take to hire someone, I couldn't give them any definite number. I don't know, sometimes it's 180 days, sometimes it's 90 days. So we didn't have recruiting cycles put in place, processes put in place that were really reliable to be able to say, it will take us this amount of time to do some hiring. And then I had business leaders coming to me, and this was the thing that kept me up that night. They were saying to me, if we can't hire these people, we won't be able to grow, and it will be you, talent acquisition, that kept us from that growth. So I felt a lot of pressure that we really needed to ensure that we were getting something very reliable in place. So our solution was this sourcing partnership, and I'll tell you, we had a lot of people quite resistant to the idea of, oh my gosh, you're going to have a partner come in? That's scary.
No us.
Yeah. So that was a little bit of the change management and talking about that. We wanted to be able to also look at new technology, and while we weren't ready to make investments ourselves, so we were saying, there's so much out there. I hadn't been in talent acquisition for I've been in a generalist role for the past 5 years. When I came back and saw how many different recruitment technologies were being offered, it was mind-boggling to think, where do I start with that? So that, we knew we wanted to be able to experiment with some of the new technology, and then we also knew we had to adjust our process. We needed to have something that was very structured to be able to tell our groups. They were pretty good at forecasting, but we weren't really able to help them with that, to say, if you tell me you have these needs in this amount of time, we can reliably say that we can fill them. And so that was part of what we wanted to do around adjusting the process. And then today,
Yeah, so we did a lot of work streamlining the screening process. So, we were conducting initially phone screens of all of the candidates that we were trying to bring in for interviews. And very time consuming. The screening process did not align very well to the core competencies of what the internal team was interviewing for. So we did a lot of streamlining of that process. We had a dedicated scheduling resources, so we've got one person now that's doing most of the scheduling, got 9 recruiters that are focused on sourcing and screening of these candidates. So our real focus was on being scalable, getting up to speed quickly, and then being an enabler for growth for Capital Group. And I think we've seen that pretty consistently over the last 3 years. Very focused on the interview process. So, when you talk about the technology advantages, we introduced, with quite a bit of resistance initially, a digital interviewing process. This enabled us to not only enhance Capital Group's brand awareness in the market via mobile and via the digital interviewing, but it also helped us to become more efficient in our process. So we were able to screen more candidates for these client services positions and get through more candidates more quickly. And then the quality of the results really showed through. So we've been able to enhance the quality of hire with Capital Group, 20% increase over what we had before. So Karen will talk a little bit more about the batch hiring and how many candidates they've been able to get through with this enhancement.
yeah, this is really good. This was one of probably our biggest process improvements early on.
Yeah.
And so we were seeing 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 candidates get hired. We're down to now 1 in 2 getting hired. So we went from around a 36% pass-through rate, which means we would hire just a small fraction, and maybe there were some classes I think that we had less than that.
Yeah.
And now we're at a 56% pass-through rate. So it's been able to reduce the amount of time that our managers have spent interviewing, so that they don't have to take as much time off the floor and they're really busy with the service calls. So that was a really big lift and a big gain for the team. They were happy to see that.
Karen, how did you get them to use it? What did you do? You have personal credibility on the line or something?
You want to turn to the next slide? So we had a skeptical audience, right? And we had a group that used to like to do job fairs. So they wanted to see the candidates face to face. We did these big, cattle call kind of job fairs. And we got a fair amount of pushback. They didn't, and the idea of, we talked about a digital interview, they had never heard of that before and had no idea what that was. And so what we did was we ended up having a representative from HireView come in and do a demo. And through that demo, we invited some of our real senior leaders to take a look at it. And it kind of demystified it, and then, they recognized, because they were saying to me, well, how do you know when someone's preparing that they're not getting help? And when they actually saw how that tool works, it kind of shut down all the questions that people had. They really felt comfortable with it. And then when they started seeing the results on the end, when we were doing batch interview days, so we would bring a number of people in to do a full day of interviews, and we'd have typically like 3 days of 72 candidates coming through. When they started seeing the results of what they were converting, and they recognized the one change we had made in the process was this hire review, I think it helped. And then we were more reliable because we could say, it's going to take us 12 weeks. Colleen's team knows how long they need to source. We know if we send out these hire reviews, and they would help follow up on the hire reviews, how long it would take to get those back. And then we could say, and then our normal process of spending more time with the candidate prior to them coming in was able to give us that time frame. And I think that was helpful too, because we really nailed the process.
And I think the quality of hire just continues This is a tough role to fill, so, the candidates need strong communication skills, they need to represent themselves professionally, and the digital interview has given us an opportunity to use that in a screening environment before we move them to the next step in the process.
You
Yes.
said a 20% improvement in quality of hire. How did you measure that?
Yeah, so really it's the throughput. So, the batch interviews that we were bringing candidates in for, how many of them were actually physically hired at the end of the day? Karen talked about, we initially started at, the 30%, and then now we're at 50%.
So an efficiency
So-
gain, have you done any measure post-hire?
So that's what we're working on now. So what we want to do is take this batch, and we have a project team that's working on that, and looking at them through training. So we have this rigorous 3-month training, and then we're going to look at their performance ratings on the floor. And so to see what's the correlation here. We do a calibration process where we are able to look at all the candidates across that batch that we're hiring for. Through that calibration process, we have seen the scores. We've had a better number of people with the higher scores that we've been able to put through. So it's really that front end piece that we're talking about in terms of the quality improvement. Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
Are you using HireVue or Green Job Interview or both?
We're using both. So that was, as Colleen mentioned, we're continuing to try to improve the process and tweak it. So recently we introduced a Green Job Interview. It used to be my team would fly to one of the site locations where they're doing hiring, and they would hire right before the hiring manager, so it wouldn't give us time to say, not sure I want this candidate to move on. And so we were still using a lot of our managers' time, and so what we've built in now is this Green Jobs Interview. So the HR interview takes place before the actual event, and then we bring people in to see the hiring managers. And that's been really helpful too, because we were able then to, some that may come through this HireVue and we're not sure, they get put into the Green Job, and then we pretty much, through this Green Job Interview have been able to, really add a lot of value to the calibration session, and also a lot of value to the interview session, because we can say the managers now probe on whatever this might be that I saw in this Green Job Interview.
Is there a reason for the different technologies? Does one have different strengths than the other? HireVue versus Green Job?
Yeah, I mean, they're different, because the HireVue, the candidate is actually making a recording of themselves answering questions, so we'll have a series of questions. And then the Green Jobs is a two-way, so you get to have that interaction with them, but you get to see them through the technology. Yeah.
My internal team is also using Smashfly, the recruitment marketing platform, and we have been using it for about, I think the last 3 months. We've got about 17,000 candidates that are in the CRM today. We're leveraging that database of candidates to send numerous email campaigns. If you look at the statistics, we can send anywhere from, I think we've sent anywhere from 20 to 50 email campaigns a week. And the message can be different every week depending on what is working. We're doing some analytics around, what marketing campaigns are working, how is this enhancing our sourcing ability, and it really has improved significantly. And we're just touching the surface on what this tool is capable of and the analytics that we can provide back to Capital Group. But the team loves the email campaigns. They use them very consistently and think that message is getting to people whether they're ready to come to work at Capital Group or not. So before they become an applicant, we can continue to get the Capital Group brand in front of them and top of mind. And it really has been very successful for our internal team to continue to enhance their sourcing efforts long term. So you can see when Capital Group, before RPO, this is where they sat. It was all internal. We've been able to enhance their sourcing, screening, and engagement of candidates initially. And I just think it's been greatly successful. The partnership with Karen's internal team is very strong right now. They appreciate the work that we're doing, certainly, and we appreciate the partnership and the continued dedication to building in process efficiencies, to understanding their brand and getting it out to the market as quickly as we can.
For our service center hires, we've hired about 500. We have only 3 internal dedicated resources for this, so we really rely heavily on that front end piece source rate programs.
So really the areas that we're focused on, the employer brand, certainly we continue to build upon that. We're doing some work, Karen's internal team is doing some work on their own internal employer brand. And then we'll also help to supplement that with some of the work that our Center of Expertise can help Karen and her team. Generating candidates is the name of the game, and that's our role in this process. And candidate attraction. So we continue to look at strategies around how can we get better at attracting candidates to the Capital Group brand.
Yeah, and I think, the thing that we always are talking about is how do we get better? How do we continue to improve? And this relationship has allowed us to try things that we wouldn't have tried before. It allows us to really think about what else are other companies doing, what kind of things can we add to the process? And everybody's been pretty flexible on, let's give it a try, we'll pilot it in one spot, let's see how it works. And some things may not, but we're open to saying, what else can we add to the process that will make it better?
Any questions? Yes.
What top 3 characteristics or reasons your partnership is successful?
Well, I would say communication. I think our channels of communication, and we have regular meetings, we get regular updates. And so I can always sleep at night because I always see, Colleen's team will send, here's where we are, here's where we landed this week, this is how many candidates are in the pipeline. And that always gives me good comfort because I'm like, okay, I can see exactly where we are. And then I think us also sharing with you, being able to share forecasts and share what's coming so you can prepare for that.
Yeah, and it's sort of that 360 view, right? So that level of communication is constantly ongoing. So we're providing feedback on what we're finding in the market relative to the candidates that we're looking for, and sharing that feedback back to Capital Group so that we can adjust our strategies if we need to. But I truly believe that this partnership is a strong partnership because of that level of collaboration and that constant communication back and forth. And sometimes it's not great communication. I mean, maybe we didn't fill it out in class, But I think as long as it's ongoing, then you can really build different strategies to improve. And that's important to both of us. Yes.
Can you talk about what you're doing on the diversity front, as far as generating diverse slates of candidates?
Yeah, that's a great question, and certainly we have a lot more work to do in that area. We've got sourcing programs that we're leveraging to attract a more diverse group of people. We've got programs for university recruiting. We've got programs for military recruiting because we're in some areas with Capital Group that have a lot of veterans available. So always a challenge for us, right, to measure. I think and I don't know that we're unique in that way, but that's one of those innovation areas and those creative areas that we continue to explore.
Yeah, I think bringing us ideas of where else we can make sure that people see and understand what we're looking for. Our service centers are the most diverse part of our organization and feeders for other jobs, so this is really important to us, and we spend a lot of time looking at, are we where we need to be? And we feel good about it, but we know we can continue to improve and continue to grow.
Anybody else?
Has your turnover rate improved with?
Yeah, so we have very low turnover. I think in this group overall, it's hovering somewhere around 10 or 12%. So we've seen that decrease over, I think it was 18% prior to that. So.
Because that's usually kind of, this particular area is sort of like a hotbed
Yes.
for turnover.
Yes, yeah. So we continue to look at that as well because we're saying in this, where we've made the changes and how we've done this hiring, are we going to see a better first-year turnover rate than what we've seen in the past? Typically, though, we don't talk a lot about turnover because we have such low turnover at Capital overall that it's not a big driver for what we're doing. Most of our hiring is coming from, we've consolidated service centers, so we're consolidating as well as growth. And so it's this continued growth of having more calls coming through than what they've seen in the past because of the diversity of products that we're offering.
And so do you see any improvement for like this group of people moving on to other jobs within the organization, not just, I'm here warming a chair, I'm gonna stay there?
Yeah.
Do you know? do you
We've,
think-
yeah, so we've developed this group as a feeder pool into some of our sales roles, and deliberately, when we do this hiring, we'll kind of scope out a group of roles that we say, we are hiring someone who we know will pass through this probably more quickly than maybe others that come into the organization, and we use them as feeders into our distribution group.
So what challenges have you seen, when you are trying to leverage your employer brand against, big competitors like PIMCO's in your backyard?
Yes, right. And, Capital isn't a name that everybody knows, and so we've had to explain we're not Capital One, like all of these conversations that we have with candidates. I think, Colleen's team being educated on the front end, and then as we're moving forward this next year, we are working on some new branding campaigns. Capital in general is spending more time, maybe a little bit more upfront than we have been in the past as well. So that's been helping us too, because our brand has been out now.
Great, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Great.